So during FDR's inauguration in 1933, the U.S. was experiencing the worst economic conditions it ever had. It's estimated that about 50% of people were unemployed, and about $2.5 billion just completely vanished from bank accounts. So people were panicking. Just imagine if your bank account just all of a sudden vanished. Everything you'd ever saved was just gone, and that's what was going through the minds of everyone. Now, of course, FDR found himself in a very hard situation. He had to draw everyone together, he had to enlighten everyone, and he had to pacify everyone at the same time. Now, the only way he could logically do this is through radio, and that was one of the best decisions he made, is in addressing the public, is that he chose to do it through the form of radio. Now, the first fireside chat was on the 12th of March in 1933, and he basically informed the country on what was going on and how he was going to alleviate the problems that were occurring. Now, we can all remember 2008 and the financial recession that occurred during this time period, and we probably either were affected or know a lot of people that were affected by it, but it was nothing like the Great Depression. I mean, people were just jumping out of windows because they realized that they had no hope, and FDR basically had to convince people, don't, because we have hope and we can make it together.
Through his initial fireside chat, FDR restored Americans' confidence by establishing leadership to unify the country and vying for their trust during one of the greatest crises of our history. He used simple terms to describe what has happened and what actions would be taken going forward. We're going to discuss and examine how FDR communicated with the people and unified the country by laying out the problem at hand, stating his plans to fix the banking system, stating how the government's intervention will enable this plan to succeed, and thanking the Americans through personal connections.
FDR used his fireside chats to discuss the problem of the Great Depression with the people who would actually concern the American people. Because 90% of American households had a radio, this was his best way. It's kind of like the internet is today, if you want to get your message out, use the internet. The Great Depression was at its lowest point yet. Half of all banks had failed, and 25 to 33% of people, or 13 to 15 million, were unemployed. People were scared, and they needed reassurance. So FDR used the fireside chats to do this. Just the concept of fireside chat made the president seem more human and more relatable to the American people. The speeches itself showed that FDR cared not only about his work, but he also cared that the American people knew and understood why and what he was doing.
Following that, FDR further reassured the public by laying out exactly what he and the government were doing and why they were doing this. He followed a sort of story format in this, utilizing enumeration with wording such as, first of all, the second stage, and the third step, to chronologically explain the processes and the steps that the banks and the government were taking to solve this crisis. Through this, he's erasing the doubt in the minds of the American people regarding deposits and the safety of their money in the banks. The government is taking care of the problem, as he was saying in his speech, and that everything is okay, effectively. Also throughout the speech, FDR defines and explains the processes of the banks and the government in a very meticulous manner, as in the beginning of his speech, he defines exactly what it means to deposit money in the bank, and then later on goes on to set the stage to acknowledge the closure of the banks, so that, as he puts it, scarcely a bank in the country was open to do business on this particular day, which allowed the American people to grasp what exactly was happening with the banking situation. Finally, he explains the banking crisis in very simplistic terms, as he is aware of the fact that few Americans are aware of the mechanics of banking, as he says in his speech, but the majority of Americans use banks in their day-to-day lives for deposits and with their checking accounts.
Now, furthermore, no matter what kind of plan FDR could possibly come up with, or the government could come up with, he knew that without public support and their participation in following his instructions, he knew it would most certainly fail. So, in order to get public support, he tried to connect with Americans on a more personal level so he could establish leadership and gain the respect and trust in a time of great need. And First of all, the speech title, Fireside Chat, is already alluding to him trying to connect with these people on a much more intimate level. He wanted it to seem as if, after a long, hard day, the president was your friend in your living room just talking to you beside the fire. And days during the Great Depression were very long and very hard. And in his speech, he thanked the people for following his instructions and for having faith and bravery and courage throughout this time of great need. And he made important diction choices in his speech, frequently using the phrases "my friends," "we," "together," "us," and "faith," further driving home his point and his goal to just connect with Americans on a more intimate level. And after his fireside chats, he received over 2,000 letters from Americans, which is concrete evidence of his success in establishing this personal connection. And in an excerpt from one of these letters, a citizen stated, "It was as if he was in our homes calling us friends."
In conclusion, today is not all that different than it was back then. We still face financial hardships and uncertainty. Although this was a very terrible time in the Americans' lives, we eventually ended up in a better place and established trust in our American government.
FDR was able to avert any further mass panic over the banking crisis and reestablish the reliability of the bank to the public through his strong leadership and credible and trustworthy public persona. He involved the people and made them know that they are part of the solution to this crisis through this fireside chat, and even in his closing remark, FDR reminds Americans of their importance while striving for their trust, as he states, "Together, we cannot fail."
All right, nicely done today. I should have these graded by Thursday, which will have us all caught up on grades. And y'all need to read